Hello and welcome. We're delighted you're listening. My name is Kara Penfield. I'm from the Spiro Coaching Institute. I'm here today with my co founder and fellow partner, Rob Kramer. My friend, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited for our guest today, Kara. How are you?
Fantastic. And I'm super excited too. Would you like to introduce her?
I would love to. We are so honored to have with us today Susan Jaffe. Let me tell our listeners a little bit about her in case they happen to not know who Susan is. Susan was declared by the New York Times as America's quintessential American ballerina of the 20th century. She enjoyed a career as a principal dancer at the American Ballet Theatre for 22 years, having performed around the world and with renowned dancers and choreographers of her generation. After she retired from the stage in 2002, Susan taught in the ABT Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis School and served as an advisor to the chairman of the board of ABT until 2007. And then in 2010, she became the director of repertoire at ABT. 2 years after that, she was appointed the Dean of Dance at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, which is where she and I met so many years ago. And that was a position that she held for 8 years. In 2020, she was appointed the artistic director of the Pittsburgh Ballet Theatre and helped lead the company through, as everyone experienced, the very rough time of the pandemic. She created lots of digital programming, outdoor performances, and museum performances. And then Susan was appointed in December of 2022 back to the American Ballet Theatre as the artistic director, where she still resides to this day. Susan Jaffe, welcome to our little universe.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here.
We're delighted. I can't believe you made time. I'm so happy you're here.
Yes, thank you, Susan. I can't believe it's been 10 years since we last spoke. Thank you for joining us. I'd love to get started by asking you, perhaps you might find it a fun question. What was the first concert you ever attended?
Well, my mother, I grew up in Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland. I was born in DC. And so my mother would take the children to see performances and concerts and ballets at the Kennedy Center. And so I would say I was probably about 10 years old or 12 years old. And I have a great story about that. I went to see Cynthia Gregory and Rudolph Nureyev. It was an American Ballet Theatre performance, and they were performing a ballet called Swan Lake. And Cynthia Gregory, at the end of second act, there's this struggle where she wants to stay with Siegfried the Prince, but Rothbart, the evil magician, is pulling her back into becoming a swan again. So her curse is that she's a swan by day, and between the hours of midnight and dawn, she's a regular human. So she's been cursed. And Rothbart is trying to pull her back into her swan form. And so she does a step called bourrée, which is when they're on point and their 2 feet are making tiny little movements very, very fast. And so she's being pulled by Rothbart just energetically. And it was so amazing that the whole audience just stood up and started screaming. Now, she wasn't doing the famous 32 fouettes, which is whip turns on one leg. That usually, breaks the house down. She wasn't balancing forever. She wasn't doing anything that required the audience, technically, that required the audience to erupt, but it was her general emotion and intention. And we all stood up, we started applauding and screaming. People were stomping on the floor, and I started crying. And I said to myself, I want to be just like Cynthia Gregory.
Mm.
And years later, I got into the company in 1980, and I walked into a room, one of the studios, and there was Cynthia standing next to the grand piano by herself. And I stopped dead in my tracks. And she said, or actually, I said to her, can I tell you this story? And so I tell her the story, and how much I wanted to be Cynthia Gregory. And she was so generous, and she's very tall, very elegant. She had a very long nose, and she looked down her nose at me and she said, "You know, you remind me of myself when I was your age." And so I walked around floating on air for the next 3 months. I remind Cynthia Gregory of herself. I remind Cynthia of herself. I remind, and what a boost. I was 18 years old. What a boost from one of the most famous ballerinas in the world and in the United States to give such a gift to a young person. And so that is my first memory, of being at a concert or a ballet, and it was at the Kennedy Center, and sort of a full circle moment when I turned 18.
What a magnificent story. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious to know if your answer to the second question is going to be the same or different. What's the best concert you've ever attended?
I can't remember something very specific, but there are those magical nights where it's either a musician or an opera singer or a dancer who has literally transcended the moment, transcended their body, their physicality, transcended even sort of being human in a way, and become a conduit for something much greater. And those kinds of performances pierce your heart right open. And you suddenly feel universal. And I've learned so much about my own characters. I did a lot of work dramaturgically before I would do a role, but I learned so much if you stay open. And this is also leadership. If you stay open, you learn so much from your character while you are dancing. So something that you could never have thought of, something way bigger than yourself, way bigger than your research. And that is when you stay open to those moments. And it's really a huge adrenaline rush, and it's otherworldly.
To follow up on that, Susan, you and I have had many conversations about creativity, about the intersection of creativity and leadership. I hear you talking about sort of that moment of catching lightning in a bottle in the creative process. When are you at your most creative? Because I know you're always pushing in creativity, leaning in creativity. When do you find yourself at your most creative?
6 a.m. Well, I wake up at 5:30 every day, unless I'm out late at an event after performance. So my general routine is 5:30 a.m. I meditate. I do some breath work, and then I will get to work. And so when I'm in that 6 a.m. mode, and my mind and my heart are very open, that's where I get some of the best ideas.
Susan, what are you most fascinated about right now?
There's a lot I'm fascinated by. I'm fascinated by what's going on in the world. And, we're all very uncomfortable around all of that and around all the things that are happening. But it is fascinating what's happening, and also trying to look at it in a much larger picture, like, okay, if we sort of take all of our systems and just sort of raise them to the ground, how will we rebuild? And I have to do a lot of problem solving. And most of my day, I coach and I do all of that, and I strategize and I work with the board and all of those things. But much of my day is also around just having to navigate some just difficult situations, difficult conversations. Um, and I want to do that mindfully. I want to make sure that people, when people create or appear to be dramatic or appear to be obstructive or appear to be um, just behaving in undesirable ways or uncomfortable ways. Your job as a leader, I lead a bunch of artists. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of emotion, not only in the staff, but also the dancers. They're very young and they don't necessarily always understand how to regulate their emotions in ways that an adult in a corporate setting would do. And so I want to make sure that when I am in front of somebody and it is a difficult conversation, that I can really approach it with as much emotional intelligence and care, even though there needs to be boundaries around it, there needs to be firmness around it. Not everything, and I realize not everything, in fact, more than 50% of the time, I can't give to somebody what they're asking for. Which is not because I don't want to, but because, or it's not appropriate, or they're not in the right place, or they don't have the right vehicle or emotional stamina to do a role, or etc. There's all kinds of things, reasons. So I have to really navigate those very carefully and with love and intention while remaining firm and have strong boundaries around it, because my job is to ensure that the overall company is at its best. And not just because somebody asks me if they can do X, Y, or Z, but because it's right for the company. There are so many new tools out there that we have access to.
It is clear that opportunities to be fascinated are abundant if you look around.
Yeah, you have to look.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look. And you have to be open.
All right, Susan, this is a speed round. Okay.
Okay.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Book or movie?
Gosh, I like both. Book, I guess, because you can take your book anywhere.
Nicely answered. Travel to the past or travel to the future?
I'd like to travel to the future.
Anywhere specific or any when specific?
I don't know. I'd like to see what we would look like in 50 years. I'd like to come back.
It'd be like
I
Back to the
wouldn't-
Future.
Yeah, taking a glimpse as to what we would be like in the future.
Susan, if you were going to tattoo a phrase on your arm, what would it be?
That's a good question. I have like 15 in my head. Like, for example, one is be kind to everyone you meet, for everyone is fighting a great battle. That's a great saying. Another one I was thinking about the other day is, I can't remember the exact phrase. You're the one who can throw the first stone, right? If you've never been in judgment, right? It's things like that helps me to remind myself to be a more responsible human, because it's so easy. You can easily drop into, you know, if somebody mistreats you, remember that everyone is fighting a great battle. Then it's much easier to navigate and be compassionate. But also, I would be saying things about creativity. When I'm in my creative space, I am so young. I am so alive. I am so full of joy. I am so full of possibility. So I would also put on my arm, there are endless possibilities.
Like you'd be tattooed everywhere, Susan. Hey, what's
Yeah.
something new you're working on?
Well, as I said, I'm working on the gala, the Don Quixote, and I finally this morning figured out how to get Kitri and Basilio married before Act 3. So that was number one. I'm also working on a really, really exciting digital idea that I cannot speak about. And also an immersive idea that I cannot speak about publicly. Um, so those things are also, and then another one is I met the band Duran Duran,
Oh,
and
No.
they,
now we're all speaking the same generational language.
yes, So they wrote a song based on the painting The Echo by Peter Doig. And they approached me, ABT, and actually through our director of production. And they said, we think this could be a ballet. So we started talking about that. They sent me like a short synopsis of what they think it could look like. And so I've been working on a full on libretto, which is now an hour long. And when I said to the band, and now it is an hour long of music, there was a big gulp, but they are excited. They're on board. I went through the libretto with them last week, 2 weeks ago, and they, gave me some pointers or some additions. But in general, they loved it. And now, I mean, things are moving very quickly. When you're in that world, the managers, the venues, the sponsorships, everything moves very, very quickly, very different than in my world. But we're going to be premiering it on our gala in 2027. And Duran Duran will be playing the music. So it's super exciting. Yeah.
Now, I'll always think of you as Duran Duran, you and Duran Duran, Susan.
I've always thought of myself that way, Susan Jaffe, Duran Duran.
Duran Duran.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're all amazing. The band has been just, incredible to work with. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how all this turns out.
Susan, what was your most boneheaded leadership moment?
Where you just want to cringe. Well, I guess I can't say that on the podcast, but out came something out of my mouth last month that I could not believe came out of my mouth. It was like, sometimes you're too relaxed in a situation and you might it wasn't a curse word or it wasn't anything racy or anything, but something I would never say. And I thought, whoa, where did that come from? But sometimes you just think, wow, if you're too relaxed or if you're tired, you just have to be more vigilant about things. But, I feel like I have a boneheaded leadership experience every day. I mean, I always say this about dancers and myself as a human, we fail up. We are a bunch of tiny little experiences, layers and layers and layers and layers of experiences. Some of them are successes, some of them are failures. And oftentimes you learn more from your failures because you're more emotionally engaged with them in a way. They stick to you and it guides your following or ways to go about things. And so if not for our failures, we would never have the kind of success or the well-rounded dimensional humanity around our decision making that we would have if everything was a success. So it's important to be a bonehead sometimes.
There's a tattoo line right there.
Yeah, it's good for us. It keeps us humble. It keeps us alert, aware, awake, and learning.
Susan, what do you want to learn next?
Two things I'm struggling with right now, which is still a work-life balance. And Rob knows all about this because he started coaching me in 2012 or 2013, something like that. I still have not learned how to have a work-life balance, which would be really good because sometimes, although I love my job, I can just get these mini burnouts that you just are so drained. So I would like to learn a better work-life balance and still do my job brilliantly as much to my ability as possible. And then also, being a woman and a leader has its own challenges. And so it's that balance of having boundaries, being firm, being nurturing, and compassionate. So it's I do find that things that would have never been challenged with the previous artistic director are challenged with me. And so it's been interesting because I actually, when I was a dancer, I never noticed any sort of gender specific issues. But then I went out into leadership in a different way. I do face that. And I notice that people, like if a man says something, it's taken much more readily than if a woman says the same thing with the same amount of gravitas. So I'm still learning to navigate that in ways that where I can stay amused, but stay in my power and stay in a place of the balance of compassion, nurturing, and firm boundaries around my leadership and things that are appropriate to challenge me on and things that are not appropriate to challenge me on. So I that is who knows, maybe that's a lifelong lesson, but it's been interesting to be a woman artistic director in today's world.
That's a whole nother avenue we could explore for an hour with you, couldn't we? Earlier, you mentioned you chose book over movie. So, two last questions for you: new book or used book?
New.
New book. And then, lastly, can you share with us what you're reading right now?
Well, this is going to sound so, in my profession, we call ourselves a bunhead if we are too focused on ballet. But I am reading right now a book on Diaghilev and his whole sort of from his childhood all the way up until the time he created the Ballet Russe. And he started with paintings and also with a newsletter in Russia. But it is a fascinating character study. And also, I mean, this man was so beaten down on so many levels, and he just continued to persevere and push. And he was brilliant. He was a brilliant man, and ended up not paying everybody. And I mean, he was also, very um, troubled in a lot of ways. But it's a fascinating read, and the reason why I am reading it was because my executive director asked me to go see a ballet in Europe called Nijinsky, and I went to see it. I thought it was brilliant. I don't think it's right for ABT, and that's a whole other subject, which is what is a great ballet, and then what is a great ballet for ABT and its brand. Right. So I see a lot of artistic directors out there, even in the United States. Everybody wants to be that person that finds the new up and coming brilliant genius choreographer. And I want to do that too, but a lot of artistic directors mostly focus on that. So therefore, their repertory is turning into much, much more contemporary ballet. And so the art of classical ballet is somewhat being diminished in the execution of classical ballet. And that ABT, we are the standard bearer of classical ballet in the country and one of the standard bearers in the world. So we continue to focus on that as well as we do new works. We just don't mostly do new works. Anyway, I went off on a tangent, but after seeing that ballet, Nijinsky, then I just thought, I should read much more about that whole era. So I'm starting with Diaghilev, and then I will move on to Nijinsky.
Fantastic, Susan. A million thanks for joining us for this conversation today.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your questions. I really appreciate it.
Wow, that was a great conversation.
Yeah, she's really a deep thinker, connector, very obviously creative thinker. It was super exciting to hear how she sees the world as a leader.
I was especially blown away by when I asked her what she was fascinated about. Her responses were abundant, and they were all linked to hope and integrity and gratitude and creativity.
Yeah, so that's it for our conversation. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
And for more information on this podcast and Spiro Coaching Institute, please visit spirocoaching.com. That's SPIRO coaching.com.
Cheers.